The old house loomed, a silent sentinel of forgotten times. It was a monument to time and neglect. William stepped inside, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. The air was thick with dust and memories he never knew, each particle a whisper of the past. This was his grandmother's home. Now it was his, a legacy he had never anticipated. He planned to sell it quickly. The house was a burden he wasn't prepared to carry. He just had to make it presentable first. The task seemed monumental, but he was determined. William started with the parlor, the heart of the house where his grandmother had entertained guests. The furniture was draped in sheets, ghostly figures in the dim light. Shadows clung to the corners, as if reluctant to let go of their secrets. He coughed, waving away the dust motes dancing in the faint sunlight, a ballet of neglect. Each footstep echoed in the silence, a reminder of the emptiness that now filled the house. He felt a presence watching him, judging him. The house seemed alive with memories. He ascended the creaking staircase, each step a groan of protest. The steps groaned under his weight. The musty scent intensified, a mix of decay and forgotten times. The upstairs hallway was dark and narrow, a tunnel leading to the unknown. Cobwebs clung to the faded wallpaper, delicate veils of abandonment. He peered into each room, each one a time capsule filled with the remnants of a life he never knew. They were all filled with the remnants of a life he never knew, echoes of laughter and sorrow. Finally, he reached the attic door. It was slightly ajar, inviting yet foreboding. He pushed it open, wincing at the screech of rusty hinges. The attic was cavernous, a vast expanse of shadows and light. Sunbeams pierced through cracks in the boarded-up windows, illuminating the dust in golden rays. Dust motes danced in the golden rays, a silent symphony of decay. The air was thick with the scent of decay, a testament to the passage of time and the inevitability of change. William stood there, absorbing the weight of his inheritance, feeling the presence of his grandmother and the generations before her. This house, with all its flaws and forgotten corners, was a part of him now. It held stories he would never fully understand, but it was his duty to honor them. As he looked around, he realized that selling the house might not be as simple as he had thought. It was more than just a property. It was a legacy, a piece of his family's history. And perhaps, in restoring it, he could find a way to connect with the past and understand his place in the world. The journey ahead was daunting, but it was also an opportunity for discovery and growth. With a deep breath, William resolved to embrace the challenge, to uncover the secrets hidden within these walls, and to honor the memory of those who had come before him. The attic was crammed with forgotten treasures and discarded memories. Trunks overflowed with yellowed lace and moth-eaten velvet. A chipped porcelain doll lay discarded in the corner. Its painted eyes seemed to follow him. He picked it up. The doll was cold to the touch. Its porcelain skin was cracked and discolored with age. It wore a faded blue dress. The lace was torn and yellowed. Its once bright red hair was now a matted, dusty brown. William turned the doll over in his hands. He examined its vacant stare. There was something unsettling about it. He couldn't quite place it. He set the doll down on a nearby trunk. He tried to ignore the feeling of being watched. He continued to explore the attic. He sifted through his family's past, but the doll's eerie gaze seemed to follow him. It was as if it resented being disturbed. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Later that day, William decided to get rid of the doll. It had been sitting in his attic for years, a relic of a time he preferred to forget. The doll, with its cracked porcelain face and faded dress, was a constant reminder of a past he was trying to move on from. He didn't need any more reminders of the past. The memories associated with the doll were too painful, too haunting. Every time he looked at it, he was transported back to a time of sorrow and loss. He tossed it into a garbage bag with some old newspapers. The newspapers were yellowed with age, filled with stories that no longer mattered. They were just as much a part of the past as the doll. He took the bag outside to the trash cans. The evening air was cool and the sky was painted with the colors of the setting sun. It felt like a symbolic moment, as if he was finally letting go of the past. As he walked back to the house, he glanced back. A part of him felt uneasy, as if he was being watched. But he shook off the feeling, attributing it to his overactive imagination. The garbage bag lay on its side. It must have fallen over when he wasn't looking. He sighed, feeling a sense of frustration. The doll's porcelain face was peeking out from the torn plastic. Its eyes seemed to follow him even from a distance. Its cold, painted eyes stared back at him. He shuddered. There was something unnerving about the way it looked at him, as if it held a grudge. He told himself it was just the wind. The bag must have been blown over by a gust. There was no reason to be afraid. He picked up the bag and threw it into the garbage can. This time he made sure it was securely inside, hoping it would stay there. This time he made sure the lid was secure. He didn't want to see that doll again. It was time to move on. That night, William woke with a start. He felt a chill. The room was unusually cold, and he pulled the blanket tighter around himself. He could have sworn he heard a whisper. It was faint, almost like a distant echo, but it was there. It seemed to be coming from the hallway. Outside his room, he strained his ears, trying to catch the sound again. He got out of bed and opened the door. The hallway was dark, and the shadows seemed to dance on the walls. The hallway was dark and silent. There was no sign of movement, no indication that anyone else was there. He flicked on the light. The sudden brightness was almost blinding, but it revealed the empty hallway, and there, sitting on the floor in front of his bedroom door, was the doll. It was as if it had been waiting for him. It was staring up at him with its cold, dead eyes. He felt a chill run down his spine. How had it gotten there? He'd thrown it away. The doll seemed to be mocking him, reminding him that the past was not so easily discarded. Section 4. Whispers and shadows. In the dim light of the attic, shadows danced on the walls, creating an eerie atmosphere that sent chills down his spine. He stood there, frozen in place, his breath caught in his throat. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the old wooden floorboards beneath his feet. He stared at the doll, its sinister expression seemingly mocking him. It was as if the doll's eyes followed his every move, piercing through the darkness. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears like a drum. He could feel the blood rushing through his veins, a stark reminder of his growing fear. He couldn't explain how it had gotten there. The doll had been discarded, thrown away like a bad memory, yet here it was, back in its place as if it had never left. He had thrown it away, determined to rid himself of its unsettling presence. He remembered the moment vividly, the way the doll had landed in the trash with a finality that should have been reassuring. He had made sure of it. He had checked the trash bin multiple times, ensuring that the doll was truly gone. But now doubt crept into his mind. He picked up the doll once more, its cold, lifeless form sending a shiver down his spine. The weight of it in his hands felt heavier than before, as if it carried a burden of its own. It was cold and lifeless in his hands, a stark contrast to the warmth of his own skin. The doll's eyes seemed to bore into him, unblinking and unfeeling. He quickly took it back up to the attic, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Each step felt like a journey into the unknown, the darkness of the attic swallowing him whole. He placed it in an old trunk, the dust swirling around him as he opened the lid. The trunk creaked in protest, as if it too sensed the malevolence of the doll. He closed the lid tightly, hoping to seal away the doll and the unease it brought with it. The sound of the lid shutting was like a final punctuation mark, a desperate attempt to end the nightmare. Then he went back downstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The weight of his fear seemed to cling to him, refusing to let go. He tried to convince himself that he was just tired, that his mind was playing tricks on him. The fatigue was overwhelming, clouding his thoughts and blurring the lines between reality and imagination. He needed to stop letting his imagination get the better of him. He shook his head, trying to clear the fog of fear that had settled over him. But the next morning he found the doll sitting at the foot of his bed. The sunlight filtering through the window cast an eerie glow on its face, making it look even more sinister. Its vacant eyes stared up at him, unblinking and cold. It was as if the doll was waiting for something, a silent sentinel in the morning light. A cold dread washed over him, a feeling of impending doom that he couldn't shake. The doll's presence was like a dark cloud hanging over him, suffocating and relentless. He knew then that something was wrong, terribly wrong. The doll was not just an inanimate object, it was something more, something malevolent. This was no ordinary doll. The whispers started subtly, barely audible at first. They seemed to come from the shadows, a soft murmur that sent chills down his spine. Just faint murmurs at the edge of his hearing, like the distant echo of a forgotten memory. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling the room with an oppressive presence. He would catch glimpses of shadows moving in the corners of his eyes, fleeting and elusive. They seemed to dance just out of reach, taunting him with their presence. The air grew heavy with a palpable sense of dread, a weight that pressed down on him from all sides. It was as if the very atmosphere had turned against him, conspiring with the doll to drive him mad. Section 5. The unseen guest. He tried to rationalize it. He told himself it was just the old house settling. Or maybe he was just letting the stress of the renovation get to him. But deep down, he knew better. Something was wrong. The doll's presence was becoming impossible to ignore. It would reappear in the most unexpected places. On the kitchen table, staring at him while he ate. In the bathroom mirror, its reflection grinning wickedly back at him. He tried to get rid of it again. This time, he drove it miles away and left it in a dumpster behind a shopping center, but it didn't matter. The doll always found its way back. The air grew colder, the shadows grew darker. He felt a constant presence watching him, haunting him. The whispers grew louder. They seemed to be coming from the walls themselves, whispering his name, mocking him.